I do not have a single social network account where I post messages. I have avoided social networks for the entire duration of this newsletter. I'm now almost done with 21 years. I do not post interviews on Twitter X. There are people impersonating me. There are accounts in YouTube that are following me, but also impersonating me. I do not have a single account on social networks, Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, where I have interviews where the account is my name. I don't have a single one. So if you're looking for my works, go to my website, click on the interviews and articles link, and you'll get some of the most recent. It's hard to keep it up to date, but people are impersonating me. There was a fellow on YouTube that I listened to a few weeks ago, and he had a Southern accent saying a bunch of stupid stuff, claiming to be me. A Southern accent on YouTube claiming to be me, and his title of the account was my name. All right, I don't have a single social network account where I post interviews under my name on the account. Not a single one anywhere. Okay, how am I doing? What's going on? These are exciting times. We've got an overhaul that's being done in a very clever manner with the U.S. government. The most clever that I heard was all 80,000 new IRS tax agents were reassigned to the southern border with the expectation that many of them would resign, and many of them have resigned. That has to be the most clever of all. It's like giving a soldier an option for latrine duty, or you can be discharged. And what I object to is that they need to be removed from the government, but they also need to pass through a filter to see if they've been involved with fraudulent activity at a deep level, and to see if they've been involved with a treasonous activity, see if they've been involved with installing cultural Marxism, which is, I like calling it American communism. I mean, what's his name? Raskin wrote a book about cultural Marxism, American version of communism installed, and Biden, under the direction of Obama during his third term, directed all the strings, moved all the strings to install, like DEI. What's that? Diversity, equity, inclusion? Yeah, more like discrimination. I don't know what the E would be, and I would be insulting. Okay, and ESG, environment, governance, environment, social governance. Okay, these are communist principles that are being gradually integrated into our society, and Trump has just banned DEI, the diversity quotas. I've got a different position regarding DEI. It's anti-white man. It's reverse discrimination. And Obama started that in his second term. He fired and never hired a single white man in the Department of Forestry, in the Interior Department. And as a result, we got all kinds of stupidity in production, in forest products, and the price of plywood went up 400%. Lumber, all across. Okay, well, we got a lot of interesting policies going on, and executive orders. I call them XOs. A lot of people call them EO, but I call them XOs. We've got a real heroic effort going on right now by revealing the fraud and revealing the slush funds. Now, I'm on record as saying about 2 or 3 weeks ago that with the transition to the new Department of Treasury, it's going to be revealed that over $100 billion was stolen from the Treasury. Now, I was not including Ukraine diversion of aid and the gay cokehead dancer in Ukraine who's on a $5 million salary, which is a good, I think, $11 million salary, which is 25 times higher than President Trump's salary. The gay cokehead dancer let it be known that 110 million out of the 200 million never reached Ukraine. In other words, what I've been saying all along has been correct. Over a third is stolen by the Swiss Uber lords, and maybe a third went into the black market, where even Ukrainian generals benefited from that. The black market in Eastern Europe is in Albania. You want to buy black market goods, even if it's U.S. war material, it's available, including for the Russians, for reverse engineering. Okay, USAID has been identified now as a slush fund, and golly, some of the projects are really quite disgusting. Like DEI, diversity in Latin America, an all-gay play performance and support for that in another country. But the most disgusting and disturbing part of USAID is the funding of anti-Trump activities and the funding for promotion of the communist Marxist cultural Marxism. It's called cultural Marxism. And these dumbasses posing as liberals, they're just dumber than words can describe. They're promoting and pushing for communism without even recognizing that what they're talking about is communism. Okay, abolition of free speech is communist. Abolition of political opponents is communist. And they always find a dumb excuse, pretext for promoting it. But USAID is turning out to be the biggest of the big slush funds, and apparently a lot of the campaign donations to the congressmen, not just House reps, but senators, a lot of it has been circumventing various routes and finding its way into senators' campaign funds, and lying through his stinking 80-year-old teeth is Bernie Sanders. Hey, Bernie, got news for you. There's going to be a lot of evidence being produced that you're a liar and you've been getting big pharma money. No, it's not from individual citizens. It's from big pharma corporations, maybe from their executives, which means it represents the corporate donation. Individuals might be executives, but that makes it from the corporate source. They're corporate donations, you stinking liar. I hope they convict Bernie Sanders and 24 Democrat senators who are nothing but traitorous, lying scum. So, I got to say something else, Jim. I knew somebody who worked in USAID. He was a childhood friend of mine. I knew him. We renewed our friendship probably about 15 years after college, and he was working in Moscow, and he was fluent in Russian. And he was either really slow mentally or really a good liar, because he said he didn't know anything about what the USAID projects were all about. He was just a translator from English to Russian. He was an introducer, like a doorman, like a butler. He introduced, like, John McCain several times, said he was very friendly. I said, but John McCain is pure scum. He said, well, he's nice to me. Okay, are you that dumb? Or are you just playing along, pretending ignorance in a plausible deniability manner? I'm not even sure that my friend was aware that the CIA was funding a great part of the USAID. He said, I don't know anything about their projects. I said, why not? You're introducing people who are in charge of the projects. How do you not know what the projects are that they're in charge of? He said, I don't know. I just know the men. I just know the people. Anyway, this is blowing up, and it looks like, this is early, Jim, but it looks like Trump is trying to dismantle the intelligence and law enforcement agencies and departments, dismantle them, and build back. I hate that phrase, build back better, but if he dismantles the FBI and dismantles the CIA and dismantles the Department of Justice and then rebuilds them according to people who make an oath toward the Constitution and not toward the Geneva New World Order fascists, and we got a new United States being built from the ground up. But I'll tell you the big problem right now, Jim, it's the U.S. government debt. There are three major problems with the U.S. government. Number one is the U.S. government debt. Number two is the U.S. government deficits. And number three is the U.S. Treasury bonds, and they're all tied together.
The latest issue of the Hat Trick Letter is out. What's in it, and how can people subscribe?
Well, it's www.golden-jackass.com. I encourage people to sign up for the newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter. You don't have to read the whole thing. They're usually 5 to 7 chapters, and pick your favorite chapters and read them like you would, say, the Boston Globe or like the Chicago Tribune. I never read the Boston Globe from cover to cover on Sunday. I read the financial section. I read the sports section. Sometimes I read the movie section. I dabble a little bit sometime in the food and, cuisine section. But I didn't read the whole thing. People are not obliged to read the entire newsletter if they subscribe to it. There's no obligation. There's no requirement. And there's no, urgency to back out if you can't meet that obligation, which is not an obligation. Anyway, I've got also, oh my gosh, I got to tell you now, I've hit the 800 mark for consults. I've done 800 in 5 full years, starting in the month before January of 2020. It's been 5 years, and there are 800 that I've done, and it's just a labor of love. I really enjoy it, and for that reason, I often give extra time if it's a really nice person, and we got a good conversation going. I'm doing 160 of them a year, which is an average of 3 per week. And that's about right. Sometimes I do a little more. Sometimes I do a little less, like if I'm focusing on the report. But golden-jackass.com. Sign up for the newsletter. Make a donation if you don't like newsletters and you just prefer these interviews and podcasts. And do a consult call if you got some pressing questions. A lot of people do. This is a very dangerous time. It's a very confusing time. Anything from the official authorities, like from the government or the news networks or from big financial firms, I would say like an 80% chance you're being lied to. 80%.
Do you think President Trump will be more focused on the performance of the stock market than the performance of the U.S. dollar?
No. I think he's very concerned about a global shun, a global boycott of the dollar, and that's why he's threatening the BRICS nations. I read today that there's some action by Russia to step back from their leadership role in the BRICS, and I'm wondering what kind of offers Trump is making. He's very concerned about the dollar. He doesn't want the BRICS to develop an alternative to the dollar. Well, I'm in the process now of fashioning a short, open letter to President Trump. Not that I'm of any great importance, Jim, but I have something to say, and that could be my manner of saying it, that Trump cannot threaten the BRICS nations for wanting an alternative to an incredibly corrupt dollar and corrupt treasury bond. We cannot use the government to weaponize the dollar and punish opponents to the dollar who want to do something else when they find fraud within it. We can't threaten nations into accepting toilet paper for payment for finished products and services. Trump has to clean up the dollar. He has to reduce the deficits. We can't force a nation to accept treasury bills for import payment when we're issuing another $1 trillion every 100 days, and we're demonstrating that a good 10% of our usage of the money is for fraudulent and fascist purposes. We cannot threaten the majority of the global nations that want a fair payment system when we have all kinds of fraud. And I'll just give you one example. Building 7 of the World Trade Center. It contained a lot of J.P. Morgan data on duplicate serial numbers for treasury bonds, which meant J.P. Morgan defrauded the bond market of a couple $1 trillion. We need to clean up the Wall Street banks. We need to clean up the market for bonds. We need to make the auctions more honest. And maybe we should back the dollar with something besides our good faith, our goodwill and faith in the U.S. government, which has been proved not to be very good and not very faithful. Okay, that's my open letter concept to President Trump. You can't threaten nations to accept a fraudulent, overloaded, oversupplied treasury bond that probably was defaulted upon 4 years ago and kept quiet.
Do you think President Trump can decrease the cost of energy, lower interest rates, and ignite the stock and bond markets?
I think he can bring about lower costs for energy. He's trying to strong-arm Saudi Arabia now into having a lower price for oil. That will come about only if Saudi increases the supply. But there are other things he can do. Remember, it was 1 week after the fake President Biden had his fake inauguration in January of 2021 that he shut down the Columbia gas pipeline from Canada. So the Rockefellers did everything to increase the price of energy. Trump is going to reverse a lot of those policies and jawbone. And you know, he's actually been saying we could end the Ukraine war if we bring down the price of oil, because that'll hurt on a margin basis, it'll hurt the Russians for funding that war. And I think that's nonsense. Maybe if it's 20% lower, but not if it's 5% lower. As for interest rates, we've got a real interesting phenomenon, and that is interest rates are probably going to go up. There's going to be some sabotage by the bankers against Trump. And here, I'll put it in a nutshell. They're going to gradually release the truth and tell the truth about the economy, that we're in an inflationary depression. So they're going to talk about how price inflation is getting worse and worse when it's already been bad for 4 years. We had an inflationary depression starting in 2021 with the lockdown and the fake pandemic, which interfered with the supply chain. They're going to blame Trump for an explosion in price inflation when it's really going to be just a release of the truth regarding price inflation over the last few years. At the same time, they're going to say the economy is entering a depression when we've already been in a depression for 4 years. But they're going to blame it on Trump as they gradually release the truth regarding the condition of the economy. I believe we're going to see more government deficits in the next several months before it starts to come down. It's because Trump is doing extra spending at the border. He's probably going to have, I don't know for sure, maybe something between $70 and $100 billion extra for just border control, and maybe for the war against the Mexican military. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say war against the Mexican? Yeah, I did. Yeah, we've got a war against the Mexican cartel, a.k.a. their military, a.k.a. their government. I think he's going to have a hard time with interest rates. I think Jerome Powell, who's I think a piece of BlackRock garbage, I think the Fed chair is going to raise rates to try to sabotage Trump and cause him problems. Maybe Jerome Powell has been receiving money through USAID. Maybe Jerome Powell has been receiving some other fraudulent source of funds for his own personal benefit, and maybe those will be cut off, and he will decide to get revenge by raising interest rates. Now, stock and bond markets, they're going to really, I think, depend upon the bond market. And the bond market has two sides. It's been interesting. I said back in the summer, if they raise interest, I said last summer, if the Fed lowers interest rates, we're going to see the long bond go up, 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 up in interest rate, the bond yield. And that's exactly what happened. What the bond market has said is you got no right lowering interest rates. The market is saying you got no right to lower interest rates when we have such huge deficits, huge debt, unresolvable debt, and price inflation that you're understating. Now what we got is low short-term rates, but they're not really too low. And we got higher long-term rates. If we get above 5% on the long bond for 10-year, the 10-year Treasury bond, I think we're going to have a lot of trouble with the stock market. Trump said something a few years ago